From KVUE News in Austin, you're watching Texas This Week with Ashley Goodo.
Good Sunday morning. A new report claims Governor Greg Abbott is exercising unprecedented power over the agency that oversees the state's power grid. And Democratic candidate for Governor Beto O'Rourke is making headlines for his potty mouth. But this time around, a lot of people are applauding him. Let's get to the three things you need to know in Texas politics. Round Rock State Representative James Tallarico and 33 members of the Texas House of Representatives are asking Governor Greg Abbott to call a special session to address the failures happening within the Texas juvenile prison system. Staffing levels are so low at the state's 5 youth prisons, teens are spending up to 23 hours a day locked in their cells using water bottles as bathrooms. The House Committee on Juvenile Justice and Family Issues heard testimony from prison leaders this week who say without more funding, they won't gain control of the crisis. In a statement, Governor Abbott's press secretary said the Texas Juvenile Justice Department is, quote, developing their budget request for next session, and the governor will support their request to increase the salaries needed to hire and retain a qualified workforce. Wednesday, a Travis County judge ruled DPS does not have to turn over records related to the mass shooting at Robb Elementary School requested by State Senator Roland Gutierrez. The judge did not answer the pressing question of whether DPS can withhold information about the shooting that left 19 students and 2 teachers dead, but instead said Senator Gutierrez didn't properly file his request for the records. Meanwhile, a coalition of media outlets, including KVUE and the Austin American-Statesman, are continuing a separate fight for records related to the school shooting. Democratic candidate for Governor Beto O'Rourke is going viral for cursing at a heckler during a campaign event Wednesday. O'Rourke was talking about the Uvalde school shooting, describing the impact AR-15s have when someone, apparently in a group of Greg Abbott supporters, started laughing. Take a look.
I'm going to make sure that now 11 weeks since we lost 19 kids and their 2 teachers shot to death with a weapon originally designed for use in combat, legally purchased by an 18-year-old who did not try to obtain one when he was 16 or 17, but followed the law that's on the books, ladies and gentlemen, that says that you can buy not one, you can buy 2 or more if you want to, AR-15s, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, and take that weapon that was originally designed for use on the battlefields in Vietnam to penetrate an enemy soldier's helmet at 500 feet and knock him down dead up against kids at 5 feet. It may be funny to you, but it's not funny to me, okay?
This week, the Texas Tribune published a report about the influence Governor Greg Abbott is exerting over who will be the next CEO of the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, the nonprofit that runs the state's power grid. Mitchell Ferman, energy and economy reporter for the Texas Tribune, joined me to talk about what he uncovered. You write Governor Abbott is exerting unprecedented influence over not only who will be the next CEO, but also what ERCOT tells the public. First, what are sources telling you about the search for CEO?
Yeah, sources across the power industry have told me that the governor has final say in the search for CEO of ERCOT, even though he is not formally part of the search process. The ERCOT board of directors, as well as a contracted search firm, are primarily responsible for the search for the new CEO. But we've been told that by sources that the governor has final say and he has veto power, and he's already rejected at least one candidate, according to people familiar with the process, and that is unusual. That has not happened according to people familiar with ERCOT's history, but yeah, the governor is intimately involved in who gets that job.
Interesting, for sure. And now this is all happening, of course, after what we had happened in February of 2021, which was that unprecedented power failure where the grid completely just failed the people of Texas most people can remember what it was like to be without power and water for days. People died during that. And so do you think that the gravity of that situation is why the governor wants to be involved in this process?
Yeah, and he has said that, and the regulators who he appoints have said that as well. That the governor has taken a particular interest in the power grid, which is, I think most people would understand. That it was a catastrophe. Like you said, hundreds of people died. But the governor is, as sources told us, the governor governing a state is different from governing a power grid control room or a power grid operator. And the people who traditionally run power grids are studied in the industry. They're experts, and but the governor has gotten involved in some of those operations, like we reported with the way ERCOT communicates with the public.
Let's talk about the other thing that is very unusual about the governor's hand in ERCOT right now is that sources told the Trib the governor is dictating what ERCOT can tell the public. In your report, you quote a source who says Governor Abbott is reviewing and editing ERCOT's public statements and, quote, it means information is potentially not getting where it needs to go, and that means Texans aren't hearing what they need to hear. How big is this?
Yeah, it's incredibly unusual. ERCOT has always has traditionally given the PUC and the governor's office heads up when they're communicating with the public on on issues that aren't minor, right? If they're issuing a report of what summer or winter is going to look like, but the governor's office, it's a heads up. That's where it kind of they are rarely questioned or told what to say. But the difference post Winter Storm Uri is that the governor is involved in what ERCOT does and says to the public. And as we've seen, ERCOT's public communications have dwindled substantially over the last year.
Did your source give any information when they said that there may be information Texans aren't getting, what that information might be, what it is that's being withheld from the public?
Sometimes that could mean an ask for conservation, or that could mean, ERCOT and power grids generally. Energy conservation is a practice that power companies talk about often, not only to help protect the grid, but also to help people potentially save money on their home electric bills, and so it's it's kind of it's an unusual position for the governor to be in if ERCOT is trying to make energy conservation a more regular part of people's energy practices at home, but if the governor perhaps views energy conservation as a political liability, then that kind of conflicts with how power grid operators talk about energy conservation, which is it is a tool in their toolbox.
Tell us what you're continuing to watch as we continue to follow this story, not only the fact that we need a leader for ERCOT, but also as we're moving closer towards the election.
Yeah, there are a couple things. I mean, one, ERCOT has a board meeting coming up this month, and that there is speculation that is when they could potentially name a new CEO. Obviously we will see there. And another thing is what happens after summer, especially when it's in the kind of shoulder month season, which is what the power industry, that's the months in between winter and summer and winter, when power plants typically go down for maintenance, scheduled repairs, kind of like an oil change is what people in the industry describe it as, but a massive oil change. And the power plant fleet in Texas has been run extremely hard this spring and summer to keep up with record high demand for power as the state's economy continues to grow and population. The demand for power also continues to grow with it. And when those plants are down for maintenance this fall, as we saw this spring, there were times when it was hotter than expected, and there was concern for tight grid conditions because of plants that were unexpectedly down. And so we'll see if that happens again, right? In, who knows, September, October, before, these tweener months when it's historically been mild temperatures. If it's unseasonably warm and Texans are cranking their AC at home, what will that mean for the grid?
When asked about the report, Governor Greg Abbott's press secretary gave us a statement that reads in part, quote, Governor Abbott continues working to ensure the substantial bipartisan reforms passed by the House and Senate last year are properly implemented, including greater transparency and accountability at the PUC and ERCOT, so that the grid remains stable and reliable. Under the governor's leadership, Texans have seen more communication and proactive responses by the PUC and ERCOT to keep the public better informed. Now you can read the full statement at KVUE.com. That's Texas This Week.